Hi, everybody. I'm Sheldon Fetty. I'm an alcoholic. I want you to know that after the meeting tonight, I'm going to search my phone for a counting backwards game. Because I'm not sure, but I think I could beat Ben at that one. What an amazing, amazing conference and weekend. Are you guys feeling the spirit that I'm feeling here? I have the honor and privilege to get to go to several conferences a year, and it is always such a pleasure when you can feel the love and the passion for Alcoholics Anonymous in the room. And you guys are a passionate bunch. You really are. And I know that I speak for the other presenters when I tell you that sometimes when you get behind a podium and you're talking to a group of folks, you don't always get the response. You don't feel the electric. You don't feel the encouragement that I felt speaking to you guys this morning, and I'm sure the other presenters have felt as well, and I'm grateful for that. It's a real honor and a privilege to be here. I want to tell you something occurred to me when Ben was talking about the effect that sometimes people get from a tape or from a talk that I've given or one of the other guys have given. And I'm going to tell you again that I believe wholeheartedly most of the guys that have been at the podium this weekend are friends of mine that I've known for a long time. So I feel confident in speaking for them when I tell you this, that it is an honor and a privilege to get to share our experience in Alcoholics Anonymous. And there is a gift that I've been given. I speak for myself that I have a gift. And the gift is that I have the ability to string words together and make them sound pretty. And that is the beginning and the end of the gift. It is not deep insight or knowledge into the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Believe me. When Ben was talking and he was saying something, and I turned to Bob and I said, you know, I could tell him a thing or two about you and I that would change his opinion. I was thinking about what I would talk about this evening, because when such an amazing job has been done by the other presenters talking about the steps, listening to my sponsor talk about step 3, and then Jen talking about 4 and 5, and I told Ralph today I didn't particularly like his talk. I didn't, because it cut really close to home. I would tell you that I desperately needed to hear his talk. It was beautiful, and like I told you after you came off the podium, Ralph, I'm going to have to now change my whole presentation because I can no longer say that I don't understand 6 and 7. That was a beautiful, beautiful presentation. I was thinking about when I first came here. When I showed up at Alcoholics Anonymous, I did not show up at Alcoholics Anonymous and stay sober from my first meeting. I know that there are many people in the room here that is your story, and I don't want to give the impression that relapse or that drinking again after you try to stay sober is a prerequisite. It's necessary for long-term sobriety, because it certainly isn't. I have that effect on I showed up at Alcoholics Anonymous for about 3 years before I was able to stay sober. But I only showed up here once with what was required for me to be able to get a foothold in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I know there's a lot of new people. A lot of people stood up that have less than a year. And maybe there are some other people that are here that have a little bit of time, but that don't feel the magic that is available to us here in Alcoholics Anonymous. Because one of the things that I know of the people that came up to the podium today, and that a lot of you guys that I've talked to during the weekend have, we feel a magic in Alcoholics Anonymous, don't we? I talked this morning a little bit about this character that exists within me. I call him Sheldon the Mope. All right. Sheldon the Mope is the guy that showed up for the first couple of 3 years that I was coming around Alcoholics Anonymous. I was the guy that came here and I believed something and I couldn't have put words to it. If you would have asked me, I couldn't have told you. But what it felt like to me was that I was coming to Alcoholics Anonymous not to get recovery. I wasn't coming here to get sober. I wasn't coming here to put my life back together. And I certainly wasn't coming here to find any kind of a connection to God. I was coming here for one reason. I was coming here because it was punishment for my alcoholism. I felt like a guy that was being sentenced to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I walked into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous much like I walked into the jail when I'm not a big criminal. I spent 2 nights in jail. When I say jail, some of you are thinking, oh, he has so few tattoos for a prison guy. I'm so pathetic that I actually went to jail twice for the same DUI. Once for the DUI and once for not doing the community service they told me I had to do. I am not that bright. So don't be too impressed you beat me at Words with Friends. You are the tallest midget in the room, Ben. That is all you are. But with that same look on my face that I walked into that jail cell when they arrested me, I walked into Alcoholics Anonymous. Like, oh, I can't believe that this is where I have to be. That it's come to this. That I'm going to have to go to AA. With all the happy, clappy, right? You guys you will clap at anything. Right? You will. Right? Watch, ready? Watch. It's the Nerd Patrol on steroids, for crying out loud. And this is where I'm going to spend the rest of my life, right? One day at a time. I'm going to have to sit around in strange rooms with strange people talking about how pathetic I am and how miserable I am and how I wish I could drink again. And this is just, and every now and again, Mr. Grateful's going to talk, and I just hate Mr. Grateful, and I would drink again, and I would drink again. And in hindsight, it is no surprise that I would drink again. I tell you what happened to me. I was trying to think about what was it, and I pondered this many times, what was it about July 17th in 1996 that was different? Because I would love to know what was different. I'd love to know what it was that allowed me to stay sober that day so I could package it, bottle it, put it in a little 5-minute pitch so I could go into detoxes and look for the guy that's got that exact thing going on. You know, I have a terrible, terrible success rate with sponsoring people. I must have sponsored hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of guys, right? And there's like 20 of them running around. I mean, it's pitiful, really, right? The guy asked me to sponsor him, like, are you sure? Wouldn't it be great to kind of be able to know exactly what that was that was going on inside of me that was different? It certainly wasn't my worst debacle. I had been in more trouble before July 17th of 1996 and not been able to stay sober. I'd lost that job on Kenwood that I was telling you about. That was a pretty bad day for me. That was the day that I thought my career was over. I got sober for a couple... I'm glad you think it's funny. Pretty soon we're going to air your dirty laundry too, mister. I lost that job and I thought my life was over. This was a great opportunity. It was over and I was so depressed and I was brokenhearted and it was horrible. And I came to Alcoholics Anonymous for about a week or two. And Sheldon the Mope showed up to meetings and I couldn't believe I was here, and this was part of the punishment. The first part of the punishment was that I'd lost that job. Second part of the punishment was that I was sentenced to be with you. I got another good job pretty quickly, and you know what happens when I get another good job? I don't know if you have this experience. I got the other good job, and it was like I was released from the second part of my sentence. Because what was wrong that day when I showed up, what was broken about me when I showed up, when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, the problem wasn't alcoholism. The problem was that I'd lost that job. So as soon as I was able to get another job, it was like all the problems were solved. I lost that next job, and when I lost that next job, I also lost my place to live, and for the first time in my life, I was homeless. Now, I don't homeless well. I don't homeless well because I'm not a strong guy, but culturally, if you were to poll all of the Jewish community, you'd find out that there are not very many homeless Jews. I am not religiously Jewish, but I am domicilially Jewish. I needed a place to live, and I came through that 7-day detox, and I went into that halfway house, and I was going to Alcoholics Anonymous every single day, not because I wanted to. Not because I really thought there was any value here, not because I thought you people could help me, but because it was part of my sentence, and Sheldon the Mope was here. And I couldn't believe that I was in AA with you. And I just couldn't imagine that my life was going to be this way, that this is what it was going to be. This is what it was going to look like. I was going to go to a meeting every day. And I was going to stack chairs and clean ashtrays. Back then you could smoke in meetings, and I always got the ashtray cleaning commitment, But I spent about 3 weeks in that halfway house, and I left there, and I'd gotten a job, and I got a paycheck, and I had a place to live. And so I no longer had the problem that I'd come to Alcoholics Anonymous for. And throughout the next 3 years of my life, what would happen is that I would get in situations that were difficult, situations that I didn't like. I'd get in trouble at work. My boss would be telling me, Sheldon, you did it again. You didn't show up to work one more time. And I would say to him, I'm really sorry. Apparently I have alcoholism, and if you'll let me, I'll go to AA. And he would say, if you go to AA, I'll let you keep your job. So I would come to AA, and I was sentenced here in order to keep my job. July 17th of 1996 was a little bit different for me. I've been going in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous for 3 years, 3.5 years. I've been getting drunk to get sober, to get sober, to get loaded, to get drunk, to get sober. I would typically get about 3 or 4 days. About 3 or 4 days, I would be able to put the drink and the drug down about 3 or 4 days. But then that thing opens up inside me, and Sheldon the Mope comes out to play, and the emptiness and the loneliness and the despair and the frustration and that lack of color, that black and white, the grayness of the world. And I got to do something. And the only thing I know to do is to crack a bottle and take a swig so I can breathe. I tell you, sometime in the end of 95, the beginning of 96, something had started to happen to me that felt like a cruel joke. It felt like a cruel joke because even though my life was a disaster, even though going in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous, even though with all the trouble and all the pain that drinking was causing me, when I would have a few drinks, I would be able to breathe. But somewhere towards the end of 95, the beginning of 96, I'd have those drinks, and it would still be on me. It was like the voices in my head would start to slur. They'd get a little more obnoxious. But they wouldn't quiet down, and they wouldn't give me any peace, and there was still no joy in the world. When I came to Alcoholics Anonymous for this last time, or what I hope to be this last time as a new member, I had no delusion, no hope, no idea, no thought, no lurking notion that there was anything left in the bag or the bottle for me. And I didn't come here happy about that. I came here with what the book calls the desperation of a dying man. I came here with no friendly direction. I think it was either Ralph or Bob earlier on was quoting that, but Ralph was quoting that part of the big book where Wilson talks about quicksand all around him. And that was the way I felt, because I felt like what I was going to be resigned to was a life that was going to be dull, boring, and glum at best. That what it meant for me was I was going to come to Alcoholics Anonymous and I wasn't going to have an amazing, great, fun-filled life in sobriety, but that I was going to serve out my time here. But I got very lucky. And maybe you got lucky like this. Or maybe you've been the person on the giving end of this that has allowed other people to feel this lucky. You don't know how lucky yet. There were a group of guys, when I came into this AA club, I went into the KISS Club, was the name of the club. The club is closed now, but it's like every AA club in the world. You know, it's got those uncomfortable chairs and those tables that you can't, it don't matter how many, pieces of business card you stick under them, you can't get them to stop teeter-tottering. And I don't know where they get the paint from, because you can't smoke in most AA clubs, but it's nicotine yellow. They must go into Home Depot and go, I'd like me some nicotine-stained yellow paint, please. It's just like every AA club in the world, and just like every AA club in the world, when I walked in that club, there were a group of guys, and I got very lucky. There's a guy called Louis. And Louis is still sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, and he and I have drifted apart over the last 10 or 15 years, and I was thinking about Louis today because of the impact that he had on my life. Louis was 5 years sober. There's a guy called Benson. I still see Benson from time to time. Benson's still sober. He was about 2 years sober. There's a guy called Kevin. Kevin is still sober today. It's amazing when I think about the fact that all of these guys, and there's a tie here, there's a thread that runs through this, that Kevin is still sober today. Kevin was about 2 years sober. And these guys saw a new member of Alcoholics Anonymous walk into the meeting. And I was no vision for you. I was, by that time when I was showing up at meetings, I had two expressions. One was the, why is nobody talking to me expression. And the other one was when you started to share, something would touch my heart and I would start to cry, and I was a snot bubble crier. All right, I was that guy that would just weep in the meeting, and it was embarrassing and pathetic. And these guys put their arm around me and they said, we're going to coffee. Would you like to come? We're going to Big Book study. Would you like to come? We're going to detox. Would you like to come? They approached me and they put their arms around me and they took me with them into Alcoholics Anonymous. And they sat with me and they talked about love and passion for this program. And they got me excited about being a member of AA. I don't know when this happened. And maybe it never happened in, I've learned something new, by the way, in Appalachian. Right? Right? I thought you guys were mispronouncing it. Maybe this doesn't happen here. But somewhere along the line in Las Vegas, something seemed to take a hold that breaks my heart a little bit sometimes when I think about it. And it's this idea that when a new guy comes to Alcoholics Anonymous, we hand him our business card and we tell him, well, call me if you need any help. And then we say to our friends later, hey, that guy ever call you? No, he never called me. And if he wanted help, he'd have called me. And if Louis and Kevin and Benson would have waited for me to call them, we'd all still be waiting. I've had this line that's in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous rattling around my head for the last year or so, and it's that line that says, when we were approached by those in whom the problem had been solved. There's an implication there, isn't there? A real direct, hard, firm implication that those of us that have been given this beautiful, amazing, wonderful gift of sobriety need to do the approaching. Need to do the approaching. And Kevin and Louie and Benson did the approaching. And they scooped me up and they brought me into Alcoholics Anonymous. And they made sure that I felt like I belonged. I was an odd man out. I ended up renting a room from Louie. Louie's a Puerto Rican guy. Benson was our roommate. He's a black guy. It sounds like a joke, doesn't it? There's a black guy, a Puerto Rican, and a Jew.
all living in a house together, right? The punchline is the Jew didn't own the place. The Puerto Rican did.
Alcoholics Anonymous is an amazing microcosm of all society. We get focused on things. I'm a big book guy. I really am. I love the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I've been involved in workshops and step studies since the day I got sober. My most fun thing in the world, if you want to ask me to do something, is to come with a friend of mine and sit for 3 days with you and go through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I think it's the finest service and the thing I love the most. I don't want you to misunderstand when I tell you that I am a step working guy. If I sponsor you, we're working steps. It's the only thing I got to offer. When I got sober, in the clubhouse that I got sober in, when I think back to it, if you talk too much about the big book, they would tell you to shut up. Seemed like people weren't as focused on working the steps as they are today. There's been a beautiful migration. Those of you that have been in Alcoholics Anonymous for some time have probably noticed the same thing that I've noticed, that there has become a beautiful passion for working steps in Alcoholics Anonymous. I think that with that comes this ability that we're going to have as we move forward as a fellowship to maybe help more people, maybe be more successful. I mean, we've been wildly successful, right? But maybe have our success rate increase. Maybe that guy that comes into Alcoholics Anonymous, that we can get him through the steps and take him through the journey. But sometimes there's a danger when you make that shift, isn't there? Sometimes when you make that shift away from where we were so fellowship focused when I got sober and not step focused. And now as we make a shift, which I think is beautiful and vital, to being more step focused, do we lose a little focus on the fellowship? And wouldn't that be a shame if we did? That we are, at our core, we are a brotherhood of people, a sisterhood of people that have a common solution on which we can absolutely agree that we practice in brotherly harmony, right? In brotherly harmony. And so if you're new and you're coming to Alcoholics Anonymous and you're like me, you've been struggling, you've been finding it difficult to get a foothold, and I think to myself, what was the thing that made it to where I could stay here? Is it possible that it was that I got involved in the steps very quickly? And I did. Somebody asked me during the day today, how fast do I think someone should work the steps? And I only have my experience, and I was 28 days sober when I shared my 5th step, which I know is too fast. You're supposed to do 1 step a year, for crying out loud. There was this old timer when I got sober. His name was John T. John's still around. He's got over 50 years of sobriety. He was a vibrant member of my home group when I got sober, and I told him that the guys at the AA club said that I didn't really need to worry about working steps, that I needed, they would say, slow is real. That was their phrase, slow is real. You should do about 1 step a year. I said that to John, and John said, you're a drowning man. We got a big lake out in Las Vegas called Lake Mead. It's one of the largest bodies of water, and he said that you're drowning in Lake Mead. When would you like the life preserver? How long can you tread water for? So I'm grateful that I got hooked into a group of guys that were working steps and that were active in the process of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so was it the fact that I got involved in working the steps that allowed me to stay? And I would tell you that I believe that that is a huge part of it. And without that, I don't believe I would have been able to get sober and stay sober in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. But I think that if that was all that had happened to me, I think that I might have struggled harder than I did. That what happened to me was that a group of guys rallied around me, the fellowship came around me, and they gave me a love and a passion for Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, that was partially their responsibility. That was partially their responsibility. But what happened inside of me was that I got broken into what I'd like to call a place of reasonableness. And this is the thing that if I could bottle, this is the thing that if I could engender, this is the thing that if I could write a formula to give to a new guy that I would love to be able to give. What I was able to do is I was able to suspend my right to have an opinion about you. Suspend my right to have an opinion about Alcoholics Anonymous, and to make an effort to try to change my attitude from having to be here to wanting to be here. And it sounds like something that you shouldn't have to do manually, doesn't it? But our experience is that you do. Our experience, my experience, and the experience of many people that I've talked to, that we forget when we get here. You say to a guy, well, what do you think was it that allowed you to get a footing in Alcoholics Anonymous? And many of us will say, you know what it is? I fell in love with AA from the beginning. I fell in love with AA from the start. I came here and I just felt like I wanted to be in meetings. I felt like I wanted to be in AA. And that is true for me in July 17th of 96. But let me tell you something. It wasn't true on July 10th, the time before that I'd shown up. And it wasn't true on July 1st. And it hadn't been true the other 50 or 60 times that I had shown up here. So what is it? What is it that happened to me? And I think what happened to me was a beautiful set of coincidences and circumstances that all came together that allowed me to have an experience that I would love to encourage, if you're new and if you're struggling, for you to try and find for yourself. And one of the experiences when I got hooked up with a sponsor, and Bob has been my sponsor since I was about a week sober. And you can't be sponsored by Bob and not work no steps. You can't be in Bob's home group and not work no steps. If any of you went to lunch with Bob today, you probably started working some steps. So working the steps and taking the action in Alcoholics Anonymous was one piece of the puzzle. I got scooped up by these guys, Kevin, Louie, and Benson. And they forced me and pushed me and pulled me into the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, into things that I've goofed on from the podium before, into going to the barbecues, right, and participating in the meals, and being involved in the fun stuff, and getting on the committees. Getting on a committee like the Appalachian Roundup. I was on the Las Vegas Roundup committee. Getting involved with all the queer, silly, strange, stupid stuff. The stuff that every time I'd walked into AA before, I'd done this. No. No. Suspending my right to have an opinion about what was good for me, and embracing not as if it was a punishment, but embracing as if it were the thing that I did not know at the time that it was. Embracing Alcoholics Anonymous as if it were a gift. Because it is a gift. Approaching Alcoholics Anonymous as if it is a place that is divinely inspired and I am blessed that I get to take a part of. That I get to choose that attitude. And I didn't know I had that right. And you know what's funny is that in my sobriety, and I'm sober a little over 21 years, in my sobriety I have come to AA with that opinion and with that approach, and I've been without it. I have showed up here in my sobriety from time to time as if it was punishment for my alcoholism. And isn't it funny when I show up at Alcoholics Anonymous, maybe you've showed up this way. When I show up at Alcoholics Anonymous like everybody here is stupid, that there's a lot of stupid people. When I show up in Alcoholics Anonymous like, well, I guess I gotta go, that there's a lot of people that really shouldn't be there and I just gotta wait till the clock ticks and then I get to leave. That I've shown up in Alcoholics Anonymous looking around and noticing what's wrong and where everybody's making mistakes and how I don't really fit and I don't really belong, and what happens when I show up that way is I don't really fit and I don't really belong. And there are other times that I've shown up in Alcoholics Anonymous to my home group knowing that it is the finest group of Alcoholics Anonymous on the planet. And when I do you know what? It is. And I've shown up at Alcoholics Anonymous as if this is a gift, a privilege, a blessing that I get to be here. And when I show up that way, it feels like that. I suppose the funny thing is that what changes my perception of Alcoholics Anonymous is very much the same thing that changes my perception of everything in my life. The way that I approach it, my attitude. I've worked at the same job. I've been out of this job now for a number of years, but I worked at the same job for 15 years. And there were times when I showed up at that job, and it was the worst damn job on the planet. And there were times when I showed up at that same job, and it was the greatest gift that I'd ever had, that I got to work there. I was 6 months sober, and I met a girl. And we've been married for, it'll be 20 years in October. I want to make you an absolute guarantee that any of those applause belong to her and not me. But I don't mind admitting to you from the podium, and I don't mind telling you this only because it's important and it's my truth, that there are some years in that marriage that it was the greatest thing in the world. And there are other years where my attitude made me show up, the way that I chose to present, where I felt as if I was doing time. Isn't that the way it is in my life? Because Sheldon the Mope still exists. I would like to tell you that I came to Alcoholics Anonymous and I worked through these steps and I take this action, and Sheldon the Mope dies somewhere of neglect and withers away. Interesting question that I would like to ask myself from time to time. What is it exactly a guy like me needs God for? What is it exactly that a guy like me needs God for? I am spiritually immature. And so sometimes I think that what I need God for is to help me find a place to live. I've said that prayer. Dear God, help me find the right house. As if God is a real estate agent. I've demoted him to realtor. Dear God, I need a job. I need the right job, a good job. Father, give me a job. Pops, please. As if God is an employment agent. I have demoted him to the want ads in Craigslist. Dear God, give me a girl. Someone to love. Someone that can love me. Someone I can take care of. As if he's a pimp. A spiritual pimp. But a pimp nonetheless. The longer I'm sober, the more that I think I realize, and I tell you, what's funny about getting honest with you guys like this, and that's really, I had nothing prepared today, so if I'm a little jumbled and a little all over the board, it's because I'm just trying to get real with you. And where I'm at today in my spiritual life is I'm starting to figure out, and I could be crazy about this, but I'm starting to figure out that God don't care where I live. He don't care where I live. He don't care if I live in a big house, small house. He don't care if I live in a tent. He don't care if I live in the bushes. Well, I'm Jewish. He wants me to have a house. But I'll let go of the religion, not the culture, boy. I tell you. You'll have to rip that from my cold, dead hands. I think he cares about how I treat the people in my home. I think he cares whether or not love is in my home. I think he cares whether or not there's kindness and hope, whether or not there's a message of love in my home. I think that's what God cares about in my home. I think for me to ask God to provide me with the right home is the wrong idea. I think what's right for me is to ask God to help me provide the kind of home he would like his kids to be welcomed into. And I fail. And I fail. I succeed more than I fail, but I fail. I don't think God cares where I work. I don't think He cares if I'm making $5 an hour, or $50 an hour, or $500 an hour. I don't think God cares. God provided me with a world of abundance. There is enough in this planet for everybody, and it is true that some get more than others, and I don't think He cares who gets more and who gets less. I think God cares about how I treat the people that I work with. I think He cares how I treat my coworkers. Am I forgiving them for their imperfections? Am I letting them off the hook and I'm making them feel like they're important? Am I treating them with kindness and respect when they have problems? Am I holding them up when they need to cry? Is my shoulder available? The customers and the clients of that business, are they treated with fairness, honesty, and respect? This one took me a long time because I'm a used car salesman. I'm going to give that a minute to settle in. But I think that's what God cares about, and I fail. I succeed more than I fail, but I fail. I don't think God cares who I'm married to. I really don't. I really don't, and that might sound harsh to from a guy that's been married for a couple of decades. I don't think that my wife... Honey, if you hear this tape, I want you to listen to it slowly so you really hear what I'm saying and don't jump to conclusions. I love you, baby. I don't think that my wife is God's will for me. I don't think that another human being is God's will for me. I think God's will for me is how I treat my wife. I think that how I respect her and honor her is God's will for me. And I fail. And I fail. I have a beautiful son. My son is 16 years old. My son's never seen his father drink. My son, this will surprise you. You don't know me that well, but you're getting an idea, aren't you? You're starting to draw a picture of what Sheldon's like, and this will shock you, but my son is a smartass. He had no shot. He was either going to be catatonic or a smartass, and I'm grateful for smartass. He's bright and he's smart and he's articulate. He's a little lazy just like his dad, but he's bright, smart, and he's articulate. 16 years old. Can't get him to take his driving test. I don't get it. When I was 16, all I wanted was the car keys. All right? Why did I want the car keys? I wanted to get out and get drunk. I shouldn't be rushing him to get the car keys. I think I have an obligation and a duty to love that boy and make him feel safe. That's my job, my number one job. Make my son feel safe. Let God's kid feel like he has some respect and a safe place to go. And sometimes I fail. Why? Why do I fail sometimes? I'm a good member of AA. I am. I'm not trying to give you my AA resume, but I show up. I'm a decent enough member. I'm in good standing. I'm show up at my home group. I sponsor a couple of guys. I'm working some steps. I got stuff going on in my life. There is absolutely nothing going on in my life right now that man does not know about. And there's some stuff going on in my life right now, and he knows about the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm a good member of AA. I'm doing the best I can. I'm trying to help guys. I'm trying to come here and be of service. Why? Why won't God? Why can't I get freedom from the things that make me feel so weak? I almost want to ask the question. You know, at the end of this whole journey, this life thing we're on, if I get a couple of questions for the big guy, it would be nice. I don't know. It's not necessarily my faith. I don't know what happens when you die, but when you die, when it happens, I get to ask him a couple questions. I got a couple. I'm not trying to be a smart-ass, Pops. Just want to ask you a couple things, right? I mean, I told you this morning, it's a beautiful world. I mean, it is a beautiful world. I'm not trying to be, disrespectful, but you gotta love a God that creates sunsets and beautiful women, don't you? I mean, you just gotta say to yourself, that's a man after my own heart, right? You just gotta, right? So I dig the guy. It's not like I'm trying to poke holes at him, but I got a couple of questions, right? He's used to me. You're looking at me with shock, but he's down there going, there he goes again. He's off again. But I would want to ask him, one question I would want to ask him, and this one question just about encompasses every question, but here's my question. God, why is it that broccoli tastes bad and strawberries taste good? I mean the other way around, right? Why is it that broccoli tastes bad and chocolate tastes good? That's the real question. I can't even ask the question right? Why is it that broccoli tastes bad and chocolate tastes good? You would think if God loved me. If he loved me, like I love my son. My sponsor says, you're a dad. He is the father. You're his child. He loves you like a dad. Well, if God loved me like I love my son, let me tell you something right now. If I had the ability, given the power, broccoli would taste amazing. I would do that for him. Chocolate, not so good. He would take his bite of that freaking chocolate. God, what did you give me that for? Give me some broccoli, for crying out loud. Why? Why, Pops? Why is it that I struggle so? Why is it that when I make the decision that I want to have a spiritual life and I want to feel closer to God, why is it that when I want nothing more than to feel closer to you, Father, nothing more than to increase my relationship with you, nothing more than to be a good guy, a great example, why is it that with that is my passion that I can't, that I fail? Not all the time, but more than I want to. I was talking about in step 6 and 7 how we get rendered, cured of our desire to drink because of our desire for survival. Our survival instinct takes away. The alcohol gets removed from us. Why not the rest of our character defects? Why not? Why do I have to struggle in these areas? Why is it that I have to struggle with envy, judgment, jealousy, lust? Why? If God loves me. I should just end the talk right here. Thank you for letting me share. That guy was good. I think I'm going to kill myself. I got to tell you that I'm not going to stand here and profess to have an answer for that question. But I have a feeling. I have an inkling. I have a hope. I have some experience as to why. I have some experience in my life as to why. What would happen? What would happen if God took away all of my insecurities? What would happen if when I looked at you, I always saw someone that was doing the best they could? What would happen if when I looked at you, I always saw someone that had a big heart and, maybe you made mistakes, but I was going to forgive you for them anyway? What would happen if every time I looked at you, I saw a perfect person and I wasn't afraid of what you thought of me? Because I could tell by the look at you, what you think of me is you think I'm a good guy. What would happen if that was my reality? What would happen if I was happy with my financial situation all the time, whether it was flush or not so flush? If I didn't care, what would happen? What would happen if I was happy and whole, regardless of what was going on in my life? If I was never afraid, if I never felt judged or judgment? What would happen if I never struggled? What would happen if I felt the perfect peace? What would happen? And I don't know what you're thinking would happen for you. But my experience of me is I know what would happen for me. I would all of a sudden realize that I didn't need God. And I would stop turning towards Him. And I would stop turning towards Him. It is the human condition that we are broken. Ralph did such a beautiful job of this earlier on today. When you were saying this, oh my God. My desire to be perfect, my disillusionment in realizing I'm not perfect, and my insistence on pretending that I'm something I'm not so you will think I am perfect, can only be described as one thing: my desire to be God. Man's desire to be God. Man's desire to be the master of his universe. Man's desperate yearning to be in control. My life is unmanageable, yet I desire nothing more than to manage it. When you first told me my life was unmanageable, I thought if I could do the steps just good enough, you'd give me back the title. Right? I remember going to my sponsor's house, tears in my eyes, snot bubbles. I knock on the door, and he opened the door. But you all think Bob's so nice and spiritual, don't you? You should try being sponsored by him. I'm just kidding. He is. I'm just kidding. I knock on the door. Opens the door. He says, "I know that look. That's the Sheldon can't manage his own life look." You had best come inside. Ralph was talking about how step 6 and 7 are this thing that go on for a lifetime. I talked to Bob about what was going on in my life, and what was going on was I had problems with my boss. My boss was making me crazy. It didn't seem like he respected me. He didn't trust me. He didn't like me. It seemed like it didn't matter what I could do. The guy just wouldn't get off my back. I'm doing everything I can. I can't do no more. I'm at a place where, you know what? If I could do more, I would do more. I'm really trying, but I can't stand this place. And she's on my case, right? She's making me nuts. I'm a good provider. I'm doing everything I can, right? But I can't, and that group, the people in AA, and he says to me, he goes, "Oh my God," he goes, "sounds like you have a step 6 problem." And I said, "What?" I did step 6. I did step 6 right after step 5. I'm on step 9. He thought it was funny. And he started to explain something to me that I have come to believe is the truth for me in my life. What is this journey about? What is this AA thing about? What is it that I'm trying to do? What's the point? There's got to be a point, doesn't there? I mean, I've been doing this every day, relentlessly, for a long time. What's the point, for crying out loud? Let's hope there is one. And it seems like I'm kind of getting off in a little bit of a step 6 direction. Ralph, you inspired me so much. I went back to my room, and I was on my knees in prayer. I got my little Asian bell dinging. I'm doing some meditation. I'm thinking, I hate that guy, Ralph. I love you, but it set me in a little bit of a tailspin, and I think. So if you don't like this talk, it's Ralph's fault. Is I guess what I'm saying, right? I was at a meeting about a year ago, and it was a step 6 meeting, 6 and 7 meeting, step study. Some guy says, "I don't know what you're going to talk about." 6 and 7 meeting. Bill only wrote 2 paragraphs. Ain't much to talk about, is it? That's why I always joke that nobody understands 6 and 7. Right? I mean, it's only 2 paragraphs, for crying out loud. I don't know about that. I've come to think that there's 164 pages about step 6 and 7. Bill, what else could he have said? What else could Wilson have said in the big book about 6 and 7? Right? What is this all about? What is my life about? What am I trying to do? I'm trying to get closer to God. I'm a guy that is blocked. Bob talked so beautifully this morning about I am blocked from God. Jennifer talked about that, about the resentment and the fear and the sexual insecurity and the madness that is in my head that has me separated from Him. So in the first couple of steps, what am I doing? I'm trying to realize that, you know what? I can't run the show. I need to find a way to get some power. What's the power? Step 2, the power better be God. Step 3, I'm going to decide to look for Him. What am I doing? I'm deciding I'm going to try and do step 6. Steps 1, 2, and 3, I'm going to try and decide to do step 6. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to decide to do step 6. Steps 4 and 5, what am I going to do now? I'm going to try and get rid of the crap that's in the way from me doing step 6. Step 8, what am I going to do? I'm going to try and get rid of the guilt and the shame that's really blocking me. I'm going to try and open up a corridor, a pathway between me and God. So why? So I can do step 6. What am I going to do in steps 8, in steps 10 and 11? I'm telling you, I'm a slob. I am a slob. I'm a pig. There's no doubt about it. I am not. If the dishes make it in the sink, it's because Jacqueline puts them there, right? So I need to have a process by which I can continue to clear away the blockage. The blockage of what? Step 6. The blockage of what? Step 6. The whole thing is about this. And why is it about 6 for me and not 7? You'd think it would be about 7, wouldn't you? You'd think it would be about actually turning this stuff over to God. But my experience is that step 6, and you might think I'm crazy when I say this, and listen, this is my experience. It doesn't have to be yours. Step 6 is not only not a step I do perfectly, it's a step I'm designed to fail at. It's the one I'm supposed to realize I can't do. That's the whole point of it, isn't it? Is that I'm going to try and get myself spiritually wonderful, realize I can't, so I fall on the sword in step 7. All right, Pops, you do it. I wouldn't say, Pops, you do it if I thought I could, so I got to have step 6 to bang my head against, so I can fail at it miserably, so I can eventually throw myself on the sword in step 7. But what's the whole thing about? It's about one thing. How does a broken, imperfect, fallible, prone to mistake person find his way to the power? Because that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to seek the power. Someone said this weekend. I've always been a power seeker. I found my first power in the bottle. Bob talked about that. I'm afraid. I'm insecure. I'm out of sorts. I don't fit in. The world seems bleak and empty. I have a few drinks. Power. Power. I'm a power seeker. I tell you, I'm a strange guy now. What I'm about to say now, some of you are like, oh, this guy, I agree with this guy. You're about to no longer agree with me. Because what I'm about to say will sound a little bit like AA heresy. AA heresy. But I believe in my experience it is what I have noticed as I walk the earth. We have strange spiritual arrogance sometimes, because we think that we're the only ones that are broken. Don't we? We think we're broken in a special way. We think that we're more broken than others, that nobody suffers separation from God like the poor alcoholic. That is not what makes us special. The way that I feel the vacancy, the emptiness, the separation, the loneliness, the desperate desire for connectedness that I cannot feel connected is not what makes me special, is not what joins me with you. My desperate desire to control the universe and be God, my uncomfortability with my own imperfection is not what joins me with you. What joins me with you is the solution that I found for all that. The human condition is a condition of separate, lonely, and apartness. The alcoholic condition is one where King Alcohol is a solution for it. And I never have to grow up. And I never have to learn my way into right unity with my fellows. I've always had a common solution with you. I had a common solution that I worked out in brotherly and harmonious action in the bar, didn't I? The alleyway with the pipe in my mouth and the scotch by my feet. We've always had a common solution. It is true, as my sponsor said this morning, that I am an extreme example of self-will run riot. It is true. I think it is possible to be an extreme example of self-will run riot and not have alcohol cure that for you. I believe that the thing that binds me, the thing that locks me to you is my common solution, my solution that comes in the bag and the bottle, that when I put the beverage in my system that lights me up and solves that spiritual hole is the thing that binds me to you. And that through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, I have found a path, I have found a way to solve that problem. Not permanently, not completely, not entirely, but to solve that problem just enough to where a guy like me can feel connected sometimes, can feel a part of sometimes, can get to taste that spiritual connectedness, that magic of unity between man and God sometimes, but not so much, and not so often, and not so completely to feel cured so I stop doing the very thing that I would need to do to turn back towards God. So I come back to the question, why would God leave me with my character defects? Perhaps it's not a punishment at all. Perhaps it's His greatest gift. Perhaps God's greatest gift is my imperfection. God's greatest gift is the very thing that drives me back into His arms. God's greatest gift is the very thing that keeps me connected to you. That I am not joined to you, as my sponsor would say, I am not joined to you by your successes. In fact, I'm a little pissed off at you for them. That I am bound to you by your failures. I am bound to you by your hardship. I am bound to you by your problems. My desperate desire is that God will allow me to always be bound to you. Always be driven to Him. My hope is that I get to stay connected enough where it doesn't have to hurt too much that I get driven back into His arms. But that I will always be driven into His arms because it is the one place that I feel the most complete. The one place that I feel the happiest. The one place that I feel the most connected. That I am grateful to God because God provided a place called Alcoholics Anonymous where a broken, lonely, insecure, frightened guy like me could find you. And you could love me and bring me back from my darkest moment. So then you could face me towards the light and let me bask in the spiritual sunlight. But not let me stay there too long. As the poem says, that I might find the men's outstretched groping hands along the wall. That I would stand by the door, that I will be a doorkeeper. Hundreds of them. But more importantly for me, one of them, two of them, 10 of them. That God will let me feel close enough to Him to know He exists. And close enough to you where I can celebrate with you His love and His compassion. I can't believe I'm going to say this in light of stuff that's going on for me right now. But I am grateful for my imperfection. I am grateful for my brokenness. I am grateful for the things inside of me that I wish weren't there, that I wish were different, because I am grateful to be driven back into the hands of God. I'm grateful for my life, and I'm grateful for this weekend. Thank you so much for listening.
Wow.